Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to another live stream. We've got some significant escalations in the Middle East to talk about today, with the Houthi rebels out of Yemen reportedly sinking a British ship, the first ship to be sent to the bottom in this conflict. Now, to be fair, it seems like the reports are sort of mixed here. I've heard some reports like this one from Ynet that this ship has been sunk. Other reports like this one from AP saying that the ship has merely been severely damaged. Either way, the crew has been forced to abandon this ship. And what we're seeing here is just escalations across the board here. We can expect this conflict to continue to escalate based on what we're seeing here. According to this report also, the Iran-backed Houthis have shot down another American MQ-9 Reaper drone. Meanwhile, the U.S. military said it's conducting new airstrikes targeting the rebels, including one that targeted the first Houthi underwater drone seen since they began launching attacks. So let's just think about what's going on here. These attacks have been being launched since November. Few ships have been damaged. The U.S. has been launching hundreds of airstrikes against Yemeni territory. Every time, keep in mind, they launch one of these anti-ship ballistic missiles or one of these drones at a ship. To the extent that it's ineffective, it's largely because the U.S. Navy or coalition naval forces, which are primarily composed of the U.S. Navy, have shot the thing down. They're shooting down these drones, these anti-ship ballistic missiles with their own interceptors to the tune of $1 million or more a pop. So this is becoming a very expensive endeavor. And now the fact that we're actually seeing a ship finally sunk seems like it was only a matter of time. This is a huge problem. Again, also the rebels backed by Iran, as we are reminded incessantly by the mainstream media. And I mean, I'm sure there is some truth to that, but it's clear that we're being geared up here for a war against Iran. This is much bigger than just the Houthis. They have shot down another MQ-9 Reaper drone, costing the U.S. another $30 million. Again, the expenses are piling up here, and this is going to mean more inflation. This is going to mean a lot more money has to be printed to fund this conflict. I mean, this is getting very expensive indeed. Billions of dollars of munitions are going to be expended. Already have been expended, I'm sure. Today, let's take a look at the markets and how they're reacting to this news. Crude oil actually surprisingly down. Still, it's the trend is higher, I think, for crude oil here. If you look at the 3-month chart, you can see we're still coming way off the lows from in December. Maybe oil's just taking a little bit of a breather here, but this is going to contribute to inflation in a very big way as well. I mean, this whole conflict is going to be terrible for the inflation trend, which we know is rising. I mean, following the release of the January CPI data, we're seeing inflation rise again. Interestingly, crude oil is selling off today. Markets across the board basically in the red. Silver's in the red, S&P, Dow, NASDAQ, all this stuff's in the red. Gold, however, is actually catching a nice bid now, up over $2,035, according to this Yahoo Finance chart. Of course, the U.S. national debt is heading much, much higher. We know this number is going to just explode as we are drawn into another conflict. The gold price today, as I was saying, interesting that it's one of the few assets actually in the green. Silver in the red, but silver's still above 23 bucks. It's recovered nicely from the drop it had following the release of that CPI data. And I think gold is probably the metal to look at for the time being. I think once we finally see gold breaking out and beginning to take on new highs, once we get a nice close above $2,100 or so, that's when silver will probably start to follow along. Silver does tend to kind of lag gold in these moves. The gold to silver ratio has come down a little bit, and that reflects the rise that we've seen over the past several sessions in silver, but still towards the high end of the range at 87. Of course, if you want to buy some gold or silver, make sure you check out today's video sponsor, sdbullion.com. Right now, new customers can get gold or silver at spot by visiting sdbullion.com/new. All right, I want to talk a little bit more about the conflict in the Middle East. So you've got Yemen's Houthis now saying that they have attacked 2 U.S. ships in the Gulf of Aden. So it's not just the British who are taking fire here. It is coalition-aligned ships across the board. Any kind of Western shipping wants to try to transit the Suez Canal and the Red Sea is going to come under some significant pressure here. And I thought this was interesting. I wanted to take a look at this. This is a headline from CBS News. Navy counters Houthi Red Sea attacks in its first major battle at sea of the 21st century. Now, this was in this article. They have an interview with this guy, Admiral Brad Cooper, who is the U.S. military deputy commander in the Middle East. So, he's having a big role in this Operation Prosperity Guardian, the naval activities there. And I want to kind of comment on some of the things he said here. So the interviewer asked how many sailors are now in the Red Sea. He says, yeah, we've got about 7,000, so it's a large commitment. That's a lot of sailors that are in harm's way. They are taking fire as well. It's not just the commercial vessels. The U.S. Navy, their ships also being targeted with these anti-ship ballistic missiles. And that's, a huge problem because it's just like the attack against that base that was in Jordan on the border of Jordan and Syria where we had U.S. service members killed recently. It seems like it's only a matter of time before one of these drones or anti-ship missiles slips through and strikes a U.S. naval vessel. Of course, that could potentially be a Gulf of Tonkin type event, which leads to a broader conflict with Iran. And if that happens, the price of oil is going to absolutely skyrocket, mark my words, because the Iranians are going to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, where something like 20% of global oil production transits. So, this is going to have some huge repercussions. Also, according to the Pentagon, the Houthis have attacked at least 45 ships. The U.S. Navy has shot down more than 95 drones and missiles fired by the militia that controls 1/3 of Yemen. So again, it's only a matter of time. That's a huge number of attacks. So far, we've had basically 100% success in shooting down the weapons that are targeting U.S. naval vessels, but how long can that hold out? Referring to the reduction in trade, the interviewer here says, how much is that in terms of that traffic? Has it been reduced by half? Brad Cooper here, the Admiral, says it's been reduced on any given day, sometimes 40%. So a big reduction. That means for the ships that aren't going this way, longer transit times, higher costs, higher insurance costs for the ones that are transiting. So that's going to lead to higher prices basically across the board for any of these goods that are transiting this trade route or that have been transiting this and no longer can. He says it's clearly flowing. I think in many respects it's flowing because of the defensive umbrella that we put on the southern Red Sea, for sure. But think about that. I mean, what is the additional cost that's being passed on to the taxpayer in the form of paying for all of this defensive shipping? I mean, the shipping, what might have been inexpensive during peacetime, even if it continues, if it requires 7,000 U.S. naval personnel and the consumption of these munitions, which cost more than $1 million a piece, I mean, obviously that is not something that can be sustained indefinitely. Says the Houthis are the first entity in the history of the world to actually use anti-ship ballistic missiles firing against shipping, but this is the first use ever. Interviewer says no one has ever used these. He responds, no one has ever used an anti-ship ballistic missile, certainly against commercial shipping, much less against U.S. Navy ships. So also, I think this highlights a threat in that we're kind of dealing with new weapon systems here, which we're not entirely familiar with. And they still might get utilized in a way that we just don't anticipate. I'm sure that the Navy, they've probably spent billions of dollars preparing for this day, but sometimes that's not enough. And so, there's a big risk here having all of these naval assets in this area. And I do just want to pause for a moment and say hello to everybody in the chat. I see some regulars here chiming in. Just want to say a big thank you to all of you for tuning in. And do me a favor, please smash the like button to help get this information out there, because it seems to me like the reporting on these topics, it's not entirely forthright. They don't really explain to you all the downsides of this war. I mean, the mainstream is primarily just getting us geared up and ready for a broader conflict. So, if you think it's helpful to get these reports, please do smash that like button. Appreciate all of you joining. So, we learned that so far in this crisis, the Navy has fired about 100 of their standard surface-to-air missiles. They can cost as much as $4 million each. Think about that. $400 million in missiles alone thus far. And I mean, there's no end in sight. So, we're already broke. U.S. national debt already at $34.2 trillion, paying more than $1 trillion in interest annually on this. I mean, how long can this be sustained? Yeah, someone says your laundry is ready. Yeah, I know. I had the laundry going in the back round there. You might have heard the chime. So moving back to this article here, the weapon systems that you have on board here, and specifically the standard missiles, those are expensive weapons, and you're using them to shoot down $10,000 drones. Is that worth it? This guy, Commander Justin Smith, says, I don't think you can put a price tag on safety and the defense of our sailors on board. Well, maybe not, but, you can certainly tell us that this is going to lead to much higher inflation down the road. Maybe that's a price tag that the American people wouldn't be so, happy paying. But the reality is that we've all been kind of propagandized and misinformed about how inflation works. And, all of this debt that's being used to pay for these weapons, it's going to have to be monetized by the Federal Reserve because we don't have it. So it's either going to have to come out of taxpayers' pockets through higher taxes, or more likely, it'll be financed by the hidden tax of inflation. And Nora says here, you have to be right 100% of the time. And Commander Justin Smith says they just have to get it right once. And again, that is the dynamic that we're facing here. I don't think that the Navy, as impressive as they are, can be right 100% of the time if you roll the dice enough times. And the longer this conflict goes on, the more times they're going to be rolling that dice. So, you tell me what happens when a U.S. destroyer gets hit, when a U.S. aircraft carrier or some kind of U.S. naval vessel gets struck with an anti-ship ballistic missile and there are casualties. Well, there's going to be a huge outcry for retaliation against Iran. Now, when they, killed those 3 soldiers on the border of Jordan and Syria, they kind of telegraphed the retaliation. They did strike the Iranian-linked militias, but they gave them a bunch of heads up, trying not to escalate things. But that's only a trick you can play so many times. Now, a day before our visit to the USS Mason, about 100 miles away, another U.S. destroyer needed its weapon of last resort, a defensive cannon called a CIWS. You may have seen those. They're like these rotary miniguns with this big radar dome on top of them. But again, this shows just how close some of these calls have been. I mean, they shot down this ballistic missile, which is traveling at Mach 5 or something like that. Or I don't know if the cruise missiles go that fast. Look, I'm not a military guy, okay? But it doesn't take a genius to look at this and realize that there's a huge risk of escalation here. And that's a problem because, again, we're broke. Can we really afford an escalation? Can we really afford the price of crude oil to spike overnight? I don't think so. We've got a massive inflation problem. It's going to get a lot worse if this escalates. Other signs of escalation, you've got the European Union now launching a naval mission to protect ships in the Red Sea. That means more targets for the Houthis. Unfortunately, they've been launching all these airstrikes at the Houthis. It doesn't seem to have really degraded their capacity much. Someone says Mach 5, 3,700 miles per hour. Yeah, again, I'm not a military guy, folks. I mean, if you know a lot about these weapons, let me know. I have heard that the ballistic missiles, the anti-ship hypersonic ballistic missiles, can reach those speeds. So you understand how difficult it is for the interception of these munitions. And they really only have to slip one through, as evidenced by the sinking of a British commercial vessel. I think it's only a matter of time until we see a military vessel targeted in a similar way, and you got to get prepared for that. How do you get prepared? Well, get prepared for high inflation. If you need to buy something, probably want to buy it now. It's not financial advice, but if you've been putting off any purchases, things aren't getting any cheaper anytime soon, folks. And of course, for me as well, that means acquiring hard assets like gold and silver, who think, when the reality of inflation it becomes apparent, we're going to see the prices of those going much higher. I see some folks in the chat asking about this vessel. Did it sink? Well, there is a lot of fog of war, okay, in the Middle East right now. We're only hearing what they want us to hear. It's not like there's a lot of civilian boats sailing around out there, posting to social media. So I've seen reports that say a British ship has been sunk. There are reports that the ship has just been severely damaged. Either way, it's been struck and put out of commission. The crew is off, and it's probably going to be headed to the bottom of the ocean. So, significant escalation. This also, the fact that the Houthis are now using unmanned submarines, I think is clearly a sign that escalation is around the corner. You see new weapon systems being incorporated into this conflict. I highlighted a few portions of this report here from ABC News. The U.S. conducted what it called self-defense strikes on 5 targets in the Houthi-controlled area of Yemen. So, you're seeing this tit for tat, back and forth, and eventually someone's going to make a miscalculation. This was after the Houthis deployed an unmanned submarine for the first time. Submarine, an unmanned underwater vehicle, or UUV, shows advancing Houthi capabilities and a shifting strategy. So, they're responding to what the U.S. is doing here, and if you think that the Houthis are going to be destroyed via airstrikes, keep in mind, they've been at war for years with Saudi Arabia backed by the U.S. They haven't been able to put them out of commission. So unless we decide to put boots on the ground in Yemen, which I don't think is a politically viable option, this is just going to be a huge, expensive money pit for the U.S. military. And again, there's no end in sight. We've got someone saying, Mulroy, he's this former Pentagon official here, says the submarine, an unmanned underwater vehicle, shows that they are advancing their capability. And then further, he goes on to quote here, unmanned surface and subsurface vessels are likely more difficult to detect and destroy than aerial drones and anti-ship missiles. I think that kind of makes sense. He says the Houthis are not likely capable of manufacturing these weapons on their own, so they are probably coming from Iran. So again, that's a big problem because that means when one of these through U.S. defenses, it's not going to mean boots on the ground in Yemen. It's going to mean a broad regional war involving Iran. And then again, that likely means Strait of Hormuz is getting closed. Price of oil is going to spike, and the cost of everything is going to go up. I wouldn't be surprised if there is an event at some point in the relatively near future. And again, I don't have a crystal ball, but it seems like the stage is being set here for an escalation the likes of which most Americans, most people in the West here are completely unprepared for. I wouldn't be surprised if we see panic buying, if we see, turbulence in the markets. It could even be the sort of thing that causes the Fed to come out and do emergency rate cuts. It could be the crisis that they're waiting for. But look, someone here says, does Biden know it's happening? That guy probably knows at best, what flavor of ice cream is in the White House cafeteria this afternoon. I don't think he really is following this too closely. So, who's calling the shots? I don't know, but it doesn't seem like we're going down a good path here, or one that has a happy ending for anybody, except perhaps the manufacturers of, these $4 million surface-to-air missiles. They'll probably be getting a nice fat contract and lots of printed money. So, look, get ready for inflation. Get ready for a major escalation here, and don't take it for granted that, the situation we have on the globe right now is stable or getting any better anytime soon. It just looks like escalation is the name of the game. We're in a fourth turning as we approach 2026 here. We have major changes in the geopolitical chessboard. You've got de-dollarization. You've got massive escalating unsustainable debts in the U.S. Can this go on for a while? Maybe. Is it unsustainable? Yeah. Is it eventually going to have to come to an end? Yeah. Eventually, all this debt's going to have to be printed. It's going to have to be monetized. Only way you can pay this off is with devalued currency. Unless, of course, you decide to get your financial house in orders, raise taxes, cut entitlements, get out of foreign wars. But again, there's no sign that that is happening anytime soon. In fact, we're just going to continue sending aid packages to Ukraine, aid packages to Israel, launching billions of dollars of our own munitions at Yemeni targets. It's like fighting windmills here, folks. It doesn't make any sense, but it does cost a lot of money. So again, endgame here, much higher inflation, possibly a regional conflict, skyrocketing energy prices, you name it, but it's not looking good. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Harmon Air LLC, thank you for the super chat. He says they would allow one or more to hit them, I think. Tinfoil hat theory. Well, that's not that tinfoil hat. Go read about the Gulf of Tonkin. That was essentially I don't know if I can say it. I don't want the video to get banned, but you know what I mean when I say an FF attack, right? That's what got us into Vietnam. And you know how that worked out. So that's one of the events that led to the demonetization of gold. The end of the gold standard in 1971 was the Vietnam War and all of the social projects at that time that the government was undertaking. So is this time going to be the end of the fiat version of the dollar that we currently live with? And, what's going to be next after that? A CBDC, control grid financial system? I don't know. I like to have some money that I can hold in my hand, some real money that can't be devalued by the printing press. So you know what I'm doing, but that doesn't mean that's what you have to do. I'm just letting you know what my strategy is here. And look, it's not like owning precious metals is going to insulate you from the worst effects of this. I mean, maybe it'll insulate you a little. It won't make you immune to them. It might help to mitigate them slightly, to make things a little bit not so bad as the bottom falls out of the dollar here, which is really a possibility if this conflict heats up. Iran is a BRICS member now. So what are we doing? Are we going to war with all the BRICS nations? I did actually have one other article queued up here, kind of in that vein, which it didn't really warrant its own video, but I thought it was interesting in light of what we're witnessing and the fact that Iran is a BRICS member now. It's from the Wall Street Journal. It says, FBI director says China cyber attacks on U.S. infrastructure now at an unprecedented scale. It warns that pre-positioned malware could be triggered to disrupt critical systems in the United States, going on to say that Beijing's efforts to covertly plant offensive malware inside U.S. critical infrastructure networks is now at a greater scale than we've seen before. It's an issue that he has deemed a defining national security threat. So again, Iran is firmly aligned with China and Russia in this conflict. They're BRICS members now. They export a lot of oil to China. China gets to buy it cheap because of the sanctions from the West on Iran. And so, when you see the Chinese embedding malware in U.S. systems, you see Iran proposing a gold-backed stablecoin currency to circumvent the dollar's use in cross-border trade. That's a story we heard about first in January of 2023. They're joining the BRICS along with several other important Middle Eastern nations like Egypt and the UAE. This, again, you can see the battle lines being drawn out here. You can see that we're headed towards an escalation, and it's not all unicorns and rainbows here in 2024, folks. It's not going to get any better, I don't think, either. And it's election year, so that means that the reaction by politicians is probably going to be even more extreme. So again, let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's pretty much it for this one, folks. Do appreciate everybody who tuned in. Please do smash that like button, share this video on social media, and I'll catch you next time. Smart Silver.